Hello, everyone. In the previous session, we have discussed some of the issues relating to the task synchronization. Mainly, we have discussed racing and deadlock conditions. Today, we will see some of the techniques used for task synchronization. So, we have seen already that the process or task synchronization is essential mainly for three reasons. One is to avoid the conflicts in resource access, like to avoid the issues that we have seen, like racing, deadlock, starvation, live lock, etc., in a multitasking environment. The other reason is for ensuring proper sequence of operation across the processes. And next one is for communicating between the processes. Okay, for these three reasons, we find that the synchronization between the different tasks or processes is essential. So the code memory area, which holds the program instructions, that is the code for accessing a shared resource, like shared memory or shared variable, etc., is known as critical section. Okay, so in the code memory, there will be programs written for multiple purposes. So one section of the code memory, it might be for accessing a shared resource. So that part of the code memory area is called critical section. So in order to synchronize the access to shared resources, the access to the critical section should be exclusive. Exclusive in the sense, only one process should be allowed to access that particular area at any point of time. Okay, so that is called exclusion, or the processes or the access to that particular critical section has to be exclusive. The exclusive access to critical section of code is provided through mutual exclusion mechanism. So the name given to that particular mechanism is mutual exclusion. So consider there are two processes A and B which are running on a multitasking system. Suppose process A is currently running and it enters its critical section. Critical section means the part of the code memory wherein there is code written to access some shared resources. Okay, so that is called the critical section. Before process A completes its operation in the critical section, the scheduler preempts process A and schedules process B for execution. Since it is a multitasking system, anytime process might be preempted and other process might be scheduled. Here, when it is operating in a critical section, process A is preempted before it completes. Okay, it is preempted and process B is scheduled. Because process B, it might have some higher priority. Based on that, process B is scheduled. The process B also contains the access to the critical section because they are shared. I mean, they are in a multitasking system. There is some shared resource, so that critical section is given. I mean, it is accessed even by process B, which is already in use by process A. Okay, so process B also contains the access to critical section, which is already in use by process A, but that process A has not completed that operation. If process B continues its execution and enters the critical section, which is already used by process A, then a racing condition will be resulted. So, it might cause some changes in that particular critical section, which will be later not known to process A, and it will cause further changes. So the result will be unexpected. So that is called racing condition we have seen yesterday, right? So that's why to avoid this, we should go for mutual exclusion. That means when one process, for example, here process A, when it is operating in critical section, process B should not be allowed access to the critical section. So that is called mutual exclusion. So the mutual exclusion policy enforces mutually exclusive access of critical sections. That means at a time, only one process can access the critical section. So the mutual exclusion blocks a process. For example, if at all process A is carrying out, I mean, accessing the critical section, then process B will be blocked. If at all it wants access to that critical section, it will be blocked till process A completes that particular task, right? So it blocks a process. Based on the behavior of the blocked process, the mutual exclusion methods can be classified into two categories actually. One is the mutual exclusion through busy waiting or spin lock, that is called busy waiting or spin lock. The other one is mutual exclusion through sleep and wake up. The first one, that is busy waiting or spin lock, there it creates a variable called lock variable. Okay, it will be in the busy waiting state, busy or waiting state whenever the process, it is blocked, it is not available for access. Okay, whenever the critical section is not available for access, it is in the busy or waiting state. and there is a variable called lock variable, which will be set to 1 if at all the access is given, and it will be set to 0 if there is no access given. Okay, so that is one method of mutual exclusion. But in your syllabus, you have been given with only concept of the semaphores, and those semaphores come under the second classification, or second category of mutual exclusion, that is mutual exclusion through sleep and wake up. Okay, so we will see what that means, mutual exclusion through sleep and wake up. In this particular category of mutual exclusion, whenever a process is not allowed to access the critical section, which is being locked by another process, okay, that means it is locked. Another process is using it, that critical section is locked. So in the previous case, it uses that lock variable. If at all that access is not available to another process, then that lock variable will be 1. Okay, that means it is locked. The other process cannot access it. Here, when it is locked by another process, the process undergoes sleep, okay, and enters the block state. The process is set to sleep and it enters the block state. The process which is blocked on waiting for access to the critical section is awakened. When the critical section becomes available, the process is awakened by the current process which is currently accessing that critical section. Then the process wakes up. That's why this mechanism is called sleep and wake up. The process undergoes sleep, and the other process, when it becomes free, it will wake up this process. So it is called sleep and wake up mechanism. The process which owns the critical section sends a wake up message to the process which is sleeping as a result of waiting for the access to the critical section when the process leaves the critical section. For example, suppose process A wants access to the critical section, but that critical section is already in use by process B. Okay, at that time, the process A undergoes sleep state. It will enter the sleep or block state. When process B completes that access of critical section, it will release that thing, and process B will send a wake up message so that process A wakes up. Okay, so that is the mechanism in sleep and wake up. The sleep and wake up policy for mutual exclusion, it is actually implemented in different ways. The Windows XP or CE operating system kernels, they use this concept of semaphores for implementing sleep and wake up policy for mutual exclusion. So what are the semaphores? Semaphore is a sleep and wake up based mutual exclusion implementation for shared resource access. That is one of the mechanism for mutual exclusion, which is again for task synchronization. So it is a system resource. So this semaphore is actually a system resource. It is actually an object that is created, and the process which wants to access the system resource can first acquire the system object to indicate the other processes which wants the shared resource, that the shared resource is currently acquired by it. Okay, it's like a token which is created. Acquiring that token, it's an indication that I have the access, so you cannot access it. Okay, the process which is having that token or this object or the semaphore, it will show the semaphore to other processes that I have the access, you all cannot access it. Okay, so that is the meaning of this semaphore. The resources which are shared among a process can be either for exclusive use by a process or for using by a number of processes at a time. Exclusive use in the sense, suppose you take the example of a display device. So at a time, only one process can access that display device, right? Or if you take an example of a printer, at a time, only one process can access that printer. If at all other process tries to access, that will be blocked in the block state. That is called exclusive access. The other one is for using by a number of processes at a time. That means it is called limited access. Limited access means there will be a maximum number fixed. Those many number of processes can access a particular resource simultaneously. Okay. For example, if you take an example of a hard disk or the secondary storage, it's a typical example for sharing the resource among a limited number of multiple processes. Multiple processes can access that hard disk at a given time, but there is a limit of how many processes can access them. Okay, so these are two ways the resources can be shared, that is exclusive access and limited access. So based on the implementation of the sharing limitation of the shared resource, semaphores are classified into two types, that is binary semaphore and counting semaphore. So as we have said, there is exclusive access and limited access. Binary semaphores are used in exclusive access. Okay, whereas counting semaphores, they can be used in shared, limited access as well as exclusive access. The binary semaphore provides exclusive access to the shared resource by allocating the resource to a single process at a time. Okay, and not allowing any other processes to access it when it is being owned by a process. Under certain OS kernel, it is referred to as mutex. Mutex stands for mutually exclusive or mutual exclusion. It is the short of mutex is the short form for mutual exclusion. So in certain systems, the name for binary semaphore is itself mutex. Whereas the counting semaphore, it limits the access of resources by a fixed number of processes or threads. So it is not like only one process will be given at a time, but certain fixed number. There will be a count. Counting semaphore maintains a count between 0 and a value. It limits the usage of the resources to the maximum value of the count that is supported by it. Okay. So binary semaphore, we call it binary because it is either 0 or 1. Either you have access or you don't have access. Okay. There can be only one system that can have an access. That means other systems will not have access. Other processors will not have any access. Whereas in counting semaphore, there are multiple counts, 0 to that fixed count. So if that count, if you reach the maximum count, further the processors, if they try to access, they will not be given the access until one of the processors which are already using it, they release the particular resource. Okay, so that's the difference between binary and counting semaphore. So first we will see the example of counting semaphore. Counting semaphore limits the access of resources by a fixed number of processes or threads. So to do this, it maintains a count between 0 and a particular value. It limits the usage of the resource to the maximum value of the count supported by it. Okay, the state of the counting semaphore object is set to signaled when the count of the object is greater than 0. Okay, so whenever the count of the object is greater than 0, the state of the semaphore object will become signaled. Okay, it is set to signal. The count associated with the semaphore object is decremented by 1 when a process or thread acquires it, and the count is incremented by 1 when a process or thread releases the semaphore object. So whenever the process or thread acquires it, count is decremented by 1. It means it will hold the maximum count it will have. Okay, suppose 5 processes can acquire one particular resource at a time. That semaphore object's count will be made 5. When one process acquires it, it will be decremented by 1. Then it will indicate 4. It means that 4 more processes can have access to that particular resource. So suppose a particular process releases that semaphore object. At that time, the count will be incremented by 1. That means again 5 processes can have access to that particular resource. Okay. The state of the semaphore object is set to non-signaled when the semaphore is acquired by the maximum number of processes or threads that the semaphore can support. Okay. When the count associated with semaphore object becomes 0. Okay. The count associated with semaphore object becomes 0 when no more processes can have access to the resource. At that time, the state of the semaphore object is set to non-signaled. That means it cannot have any further access. So this particular situation, for a real world example for this counting semaphore concept is the dormitory system for accommodation. You might have heard about dormitory system or DOMS, which are available for accommodation. They are similar to what you call PG in cities, wherein instead of having a separate or independent room, people share a common room and there are multiple beds in that room. Okay, dormitory contains a fixed number of beds. Say in this example, say there are 5 number of beds in that room, and at any point of time it can be shared by the maximum number of users supported by the dormitory. That means only 5 users. In this case, 5 users can 5 users can be occupied in that particular room or the dormitory. So this is an example for a counting semaphore wherein you're keeping a count. So it's not like it is available or not available. Based on the count, if a person wants to avail the dormitory facility, he or she can contact the dormitory caretaker or the owner of that for checking the availability. If beds are available in the dorm, the caretaker will hand over the keys to the user. If the beds are not available, the user can register his or her name to get the notifications whenever a slot is available, right? Similarly, whenever the process, it wants to access that particular resource, If it is available, then it will be given access. If it is not available, the process will be sleeping. The process will be kept in sleep mode, or it is block mode. Those who are availing the dormitory shares the dorm facilities like TV, telephone, toilet, etc. They are shared by the persons who are occupying or availing the dormitory. Just like processes which are having accessing the shared resources, they share the certain system resources. So when a DOM user vacates, like if one process gets complete or releases the uh, shared resource, he or she gives the keys back to the caretaker. Okay, the caretaker informs the users who booked in advance about the DOM availability. Just like here, whenever a process releases that particular shared resource, it will send a message to the process which is in blocking mode, a block mode, to wake up. Right, that sleeping process will wake up, and that will be given access to the shared resource. So this is an example of how this particular counting semaphore can be considered, and it is similar to sharing a room in a dormitory. So process A, okay, semaphore object unavailable, sleep till semaphore object is available. Okay, so room key available, wait till it is available. If it is not available, you have to wait till it is available. Then you keep checking. If the semaphore object available, semaphore object is similar to room key in this case. If the semaphore object is available, so you are checking it. If it is available, if it is not available, you keep waiting. If it is available, you occupy the shared room. Okay, that is similar to semaphore object available. If the key is available, you occupy the shared room. In this example, if the semaphore object is available, you acquire that critical section. Okay, while leaving the room, you return the key to the caretaker, who will notify the availability to other users who had previously booked the room. Similarly, when a process leaves the critical section, it releases that semaphore object uh, and gives a wake up signal to the sleeping processes. Okay, so this is the way you can find the similarity, or you can try to understand the concept of counting semaphore by taking one real world example. I hope it is clear. So here, there are multiple beds. This showing multiple beds and different facilities in the shared room. Just like there are multiple processes to try to access that critical section. Okay, and this key, is an example for semaphore object. The availability of key can be compared to the availability of the semaphore object. So if you compare these counting and binary semaphores in operation, they are very much similar, but the difference is that binary semaphore are used only for exclusive access, whereas counting semaphores are used for both exclusive as well as limited access. Exclusive access means only one process can access that critical section by restricting the maximum count value associated with semaphore to 1 at the time of creation of the semaphore object. Limited access means by restricting the maximum count value associated with the semaphore object to the limited number. Okay, some number like 4, 5, or 10, some number, limited number, fixed number at the time of creation of the semaphore object. At the time of creation itself, it will be fixed. Later, it will not be modified. So this is the basic difference between counting and binary semaphores. So we have seen counting semaphore with example. Similarly, we will see a binary semaphore. Binary semaphore is also called mutex. So this is a synchronization object, just like counting semaphore. This is also a synchronization object provided by OS for process or thread synchronization. Any process or thread can create a mutex object. Binary semaphore object is also called mutex object, and other processes or threads of the system can use this mutex object for synchronizing the access to critical sections. Only one process or thread can own the mutex object at a time. Okay, only one processor or thread can own that mutex object at a time. The state of a mutex object is set to signaled when it is not owned by any process or thread, and set to non-signaled when it is owned by any process or thread. When it is owned already, it will be non-signaled. That means it is not available to the other processes. When it is not owned by any process or thread, it will be signaled. That means it can be taken by any process or thread. So here the real world example for mutex concept or the binary semaphore concept is the hotel accommodation system. Unlike dormitories, where within a room there are multiple beds which can be shared by multiple people, in a hotel accommodation system or a lodging system, one room is occupied by only one person or whoever comes with him, right? only one occupant or his partners, whoever it is. So it's not like you can share the beds with unknown people inside an hotel accommodation system. The rooms in a hotel are shared for the public. Any user who pays and follows the norms of the hotel can avail the rooms for accommodation. A person wants to avail the a person who wants to avail the hotel room facility can contact the hotel reception for checking the room availability. If the room is available, the receptionist will hand over the room key to the user, right? If the room is not available, the user can book the room to get the notifications when a room becomes available. When a person gets a room, he or she is granted the exclusive access to the room facilities like TV, telephone, toilet, etc. That means only the person occupying the room will have access to those things. It will not be shared with the different people because all these things will be inside that room, right? When a user vacates the room, he or she gives the keys back to the receptionist. Then the receptionist will inform the users who had booked in advance about the room's availability. So if you take this in the uh, OS point of view, the processors, when they want access, they will contact, the OS kernel, or they will try to get information if the that critical section can be accessed. They will check the semaphore object or the mutex object. If it is available, they can access it. If it is already taken, they will be in the blocked state or sleeping state. Then the processors which are accessing it, they will be accessing it exclusively, which do not have access to the others, right? Once they release it, that object is declared as signaled, and the process which were sleeping, they will wake up and they get access to the critical section. Okay, so yeah, the mutex object unavailable, you go to sleep till it is available. Just like room key unavailable, you book and wait till it becomes available. Here it is like a room key, not like sharing bed. Is mutex object available? Like it's like checking whether the room key is available. If it is available, you occupy the room. If it is not available, you wait. Okay, you occupy the room. Here, if the mutex object is available, you acquire the critical section. This is the critical section or the shared memory. So once you are leaving the critical section, release the mutex object, waking up the sleeping processes, right? Release the mutex object, and which this will wake up the sleeping processes so they can access that critical section. Just like while you are vacating the room, you return the key to the receptionist, and he will notify the availability to the other users who had booked the room so that they can come and occupy the room. So this is how you can relate the concept of the semaphores with the real world examples. So this is what we have in our topic of task synchronization techniques by using semaphores, that is binary and counting semaphores. The next topic we have in this chapter is one more important topic, that is how to choose an RTOS. So we have seen multiple features and different requirements of RTOS. So based on this, we need to choose an RTOS. There are multiple RTOS available, which is suitable for your requirement. You have to choose it properly. So what are the requirements you need to consider while choosing an RTOS? So the decision of choosing an RTOS for an embedded design is very crucial. So there are a lot of factors which need to be analyzed carefully before making that decision. So these requirements, they fall under two categories. One is called the functional requirements. The other one is non-functional requirements. So what are the functional requirements? Functional requirements, there are some 7 to 8 requirements that are mentioned. The first one is the processor support. So it is not necessary that all RTOS support all kinds of processor architecture. So you should uh, find, or you should make sure, you should ensure that the processor which you are using is supported by the RTOS. Okay. Then the memory requirements. The OS requires ROM memory for holding the OS files, like program files, and it is normally stored in a non-volatile memory like flash. OS requires working memory RAM for loading the OS services. So both ROM and RAM, you need to consider their requirements. Okay, since embedded systems are memory constrained, it is essential to evaluate the minimal ROM and RAM requirements for the OS under consideration. So you need to take care of how much ROM and RAM are required. So it should not be too high also, right? So you need to take care of the minimal ROM and RAM requirements for the OS that you are considering. Then the real-time capabilities. So it is not mandatory that all operating system for all embedded systems need to be real-time, and all embedded operating systems are real-time in behavior. So we have seen this, right? Every time we do not need a real-time operating system. Based on our requirements, the task or process scheduling policies, they play an important role in the real-time behavior of an operating system. You should analyze the real-time capabilities of the OS under consideration and the standards met by operating system for real-time capabilities. Okay. Then the kernel and interrupt latency, that is the delay taken for handling the interrupts. The kernel of the OS may disable the interrupts while executing certain services, and it may lead to interrupt latency. It might take more time to serve or handle the interrupts when they are disabled. For an embedded system whose response requirements are high, this latency should be minimal. So you need to consider this requirement also. Next requirement is inter-process communication and task synchronization, the topic we have just seen. The implementation of this IPC, inter-process communication and task synchronization, is again dependent on the OS kernel. Certain kernels may provide a bunch of options, whereas others provide very limited options. You need to take care of what are the options provided by the OS that you are considering for providing the communication and synchronization between different processes or tasks. Next requirement is modularization support. Most of the operating systems provide a bunch of features. Sometimes it may not be necessary for an embedded product for its functioning. All the features provided may not be necessary. So it is very useful if the OS supports modularization. Modularization means uh, you can the developer can choose the essential modules and recompile the OS image for functioning. Okay, he can choose essential modules that he requires and recompile the OS image for functioning. One example for highly modular OS is the Windows CE operating system. Next requirement is the support for networking and communication. This is required when you want to communicate between different systems that are connected over a network. The OS kernel may provide stack implementation and driver support for a bunch of communication interfaces and networking. You have to make sure that the OS that you are considering provides support for all the interfaces required by your embedded product. Okay. Then last one is the development language support. Certain operating systems include the runtime libraries required for running applications, which are written in languages like Java or C Sharp. If at all you are running a Java application, a Java virtual machine customized for the operating system is essential. Similarly, .NET Compact Framework, .NET CF, is required for running Microsoft .NET applications on top of operating systems. So you need to see whether your operating systems, they support all these things if you want to run certain applications. Okay. The OS may include these components as built-in component. If not, you check the availability of the same from third-party vendor. Okay, if they are available, then you can move forward with that particular operating system. So these are all the functional requirements. The processor support, memory requirements, real-time capabilities, kernel and interrupt latency, IPC and task synchronization, modularization support, support for networking and communication, and development language support. Then we have non-functional requirements. In that, the first one is whether it is custom developed or off the shelf. Custom developed means you are making customized product. Off the shelf means you are using some off the shelf component which are readily available in the market. Okay, so depending on the OS requirement, it is possible to go for the complete development of an operating system suiting the embedded system needs, or use an off-the-shelf readily available operating system which is either a commercial product or an open source product which is in close match with the system requirements. So you can start from the scratch and build an operating system, or you can have a readily available operating system and use it. Sometimes it is possible to build the required features by customizing an open source operating system. Sometimes you can also customize an available operating system, which if it is open source operating system. So the decision on which to select is purely dependent on the development cost, the licensing fees, if it is not open source, then the development time and the availability of skilled resources. So these are the different factors we need to consider. Next non-functional requirement is your cost. Okay. cost, the total cost for developing or buying the OS and maintaining it in terms of commercial product and custom build needs to be evaluated before taking a decision of selection of OS. The cost also matters, like right, for the cost for developing or buying an OS or maintenance cost, everything it matters. Next is the development and debugging tools. So the tools available for development and debugging, that also plays an important role. The availability of development and debugging tools is also a critical decision making factor. Certain operating systems may be superior in performance, but the availability of tools for supporting the development may be limited. So we need to explore the different tools which are available for the OS that you are considering. Next requirement is the ease of use. So how easy it is for the user to use, that is also one of the requirement. How easy it is to use a commercial RTOS is another important feature that needs to be considered in the RTOS selection. Next is after sales. That means the support provided after sales. For a commercial embedded RTOS, after sales in the form of email, on-call services, for bug fixes, if at all there are any problems, customer support, how will they provide it? Okay, critical patch updates and support for production issues like security updates, how they are provided, how regularly you get updates. So all this should be analyzed thoroughly before choosing a particular RTOS. Okay, so these are the non-functional requirements, that is custom developed or off the shelf, cost, development and debugging tools availability, ease of use, and after sales. So these are the requirements you need to consider while choosing an RTOS. So broadly, you can classify them into functional and non-functional requirements. Okay. So with this, we will stop today's session. Tomorrow, we will continue with the next topic in this particular chapter.